All right, good morning. I like following silence and hugs. It's good. It's good. Well, like Matt said, my name is Michael DeFazio, and I am excited to be here with you guys. You'll probably hear that a lot this week. I hope everybody means it as much as I do. I'm sure they indeed do. I am normally a professor of New Testament at Ozark Christian College, where I get to train up young people and send them out all over the world to do different kinds of kingdom work. But more importantly for right now, I will be spending the week here with you at Bible and Beach, and I'm super pumped, to be here. It's going to be good for us to spend some time together. And I like to just be totally upfront with people. Anytime I get an opportunity to do something like this, my goal, I like to talk about what I'm trying to do. And my goal really this week is pretty simple. I just want to guide your conversation with Jesus. That's really all I want to happen. I want my voice to enhance his voice, my words to help you hear clearly his words. And I don't know, I'd imagine that for some of you, you grew up in church, the idea of having a conversation with Jesus is not that weird, not that strange. It's all good, it's fine. For others, maybe, it's a little bit like the idea of talking to a person or listening to a person or hearing from a person who lived a long time ago and then died and then supposedly rose again. It's just kind of bizarre. And wherever you are on that spectrum, that's fine, because I think that Jesus has started or worked to continue a conversation with all of you. And if you've not heard that yet, it will happen if you tune in and listen. I love the Selah moments that we spend together. So really, like I said, all I want to do is to help you hear his voice and to play a small part in the process that he's working out in your lives this week. So more specifically, what I'll have a chance to do is just spend a few moments with you every morning, talking to you for a little bit about the day's theme, kind of setting things up a little bit, setting the table, so to speak, so that we can get our minds and hearts focused on the direction that Jesus wants to take us for each of the days that we'll spend together. I do love this and then theme that we're going to be kind of talking underneath all week long. Like Matt said last night, until you have the words and then, you don't have a story. It's just a bare fact. You know what I mean? Like, so there was this kid living under the staircase who didn't know he was a great wizard. Okay, that's just a detail. And then Hagrid showed up. Now we got a story. You know what I mean? Or there was these little people with hairy feet who were kind of small and lived in this green place called the Shire. All right, like what is this? It's just a fact. And then one of them discovered the ring that ruled them all. Okay, now we have a story. And so I love this and then idea because it keeps the story moving forward. And actually, we'll play some games with our kids. We'll do some story games with our children. Like I said, I got two kiddos, 7 and 4, and we'll do this thing where they tell part of a story and then say and then the next person picks up the story from there and tells part, says and then, and you kind of continue on. Now, usually it's pretty predictable what you're going to get from the two of them. My daughter, Claire, who's an angel, who's 7, she usually will talk about, like unicorns and little pigs and different sweet animals playing together in peaceful ways. Typically it's something along those lines. My son, Carson, who's 4, you can always count on when his portion of the story comes, a great big lion is going to show up and kill everyone. So that's kind of the rhythm that we roll with. And I was doing this one time with just him. It was just he and I. So he was telling details, and then I would say, and them. I'm like, all right, buddy, I want you to tell me a story. Okay, so I'll kick it off. And he says, once upon a time, there were some good ducks swimming outside in the backyard. All right, cool. And then the big lion showed up to eat them. Okay, I think I know where this is going. And then the ducks killed the lion. Yeah, and I'm like, whoa, plot twist, And I said, well, how'd they do that? And he said, by showing him their bottoms. All right, buddy. And then the end. Okay, great story, Moral of the story, nothing kills like a duck butt. You know what I mean? Like, just so you know, if you were wondering, that's how this story went. And it's true that sometimes stories move in unexpected directions. So what turns will yours take this week? And then? Well, I guess we'll see. Let me pray for us, and then we'll jump into the Word. Father God, I pray for each of the people in the room, myself included, that you would help us to tune out the distractions, certainly the negative ones, but also even the positive ones at this point. Help us to tune them out and hear your voice. And as we look at the life of Peter, gosh, we just want to see what Peter would want us to see. Most importantly, what you would want us to see. And so be with us. We acknowledge your presence in the room, in our lives, and we ask that you would do your work in us. We pray these things in your name. Amen. Open up your Bibles to Matthew chapter 14. That's where we're going to be turning this morning. Each time we're going to look at a story from the life of Peter as he encounters Jesus. This morning's in Matthew 14. Now, if you're new to the Bible, please, 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 there's no reason why, if you don't know how the Bible works, you should just automatically know. So ask somebody. Find me. Find somebody you trust, a friend, a leader, whatever, and help us. We'll kind of help you figure out when somebody says turn to Matthew 14, what that even means. So Matthew is one of 4 official biographers of Jesus: Matthew, Mark, Luke, John. And if you don't know where it is, just table of contents, find Matthew, and then turn to that page number. Matthew tells the story of Jesus, and one of the main characters outside of Jesus is this guy, Peter. So this story is in Matthew chapter 14. We're going to start in verse 22, and we're going to read the whole thing all the way down to, we'll finish at verse 33. So here's what happened in Matthew chapter 14, starting in verse 22. Immediately, Jesus made the disciples get into the boat and go on ahead of him to the other side while he dismissed the crowd. After he had dismissed them, he went up on a mountainside by himself to pray. Later that night, he was there alone, and the boat was already a considerable distance from the land, buffeted by the waves because the wind was against it. Shortly before dawn, Jesus went out to them, walking on the lake. When the disciples saw him walking on the lake, they were terrified. "It's a ghost," they said, and they cried out in fear. But Jesus immediately said to them, "Take courage, it is I." We're going to come back to that phrase. Literally, he says, "I am." Take courage, I am. Don't be afraid. "Lord, if it's you," Peter replied, "tell me to come to you on the water." "Come," he said. And then Peter got down out of the boat, walked on the water, and came toward Jesus. But when he saw the wind, he was afraid, and beginning to sink, cried out, "Lord, save me." And immediately Jesus reached out his hand and caught him. "You have little faith," he said. "Why did you doubt?" And when they climbed into the boat, the wind died down. And then those who were in the boat worshiped him, saying, "Truly you are the Son of God." I want to focus our attention this morning on focusing our attention. I want to talk to you a little bit about the importance of seeing clearly. I think I can say safely that if you look at the wrong things, then your life will lack the stability and purpose and power and clarity and freedom and joy that each of us is seeking. Now, we're obviously talking about more than just physical eyesight, more than just like what you see with your eyes. It's about what you let into and keep in front of your minds. It's not just what you see with your eyes, it's what you see with your soul. You know what I mean? And using physical eyesight as a metaphor for spiritual insight is pretty common to virtually all religious traditions throughout time, because there's this undeniable connection between what we see physically in the world with our eyes and this unseen spiritual reality that goes beyond what we can actually envision. I mean, you ever wonder why we're so fascinated with eyes? And maybe you think, I don't know that I'm fascinated with eyes, but think about how often we talk about eyes. Think about how many sayings we have in our culture with the word eye in it. People say, "Beauty is in the eye of the beholder," or "I can't believe my eyes." You can bat your eyes. You can cry your eyes out. Somebody may have said to you at some point, "Keep your eye on the ball," or "Man, you are a sight for sore eyes." I said it earlier. They're the apple of my eye, right? Maybe somebody gives you the stink eye or the evil eye. Maybe who you are in your mind's eye is different from who you are in the public eye. It goes on and on. I found this list of common popular sayings in our culture with the word eyes in it, and I counted it up, 289 of them. Man, when I saw that number, my eyes just about popped out of my head. You know what I mean? There's just so many different things, and I suppose it kind of makes sense if you stop to think about how impressive our eyes actually are. 80% of our memories are determined by what we see. If I called you later on, I was like, "Hey, tell me a story from your childhood," the first thing you would do is you would not start speaking. It might feel like that's what you do first, but the first thing you would do is you would picture the scene. Because maybe you've seen it on a video camera, or you've seen it, pictures of it, or you actually remember what it was that you were looking at. So you would picture it, and then you would immediately start telling the story. Sight does more work for us in helping us interpret the world around us than each of the other 4 senses combined. And the eye itself, man, it's crazy, fascinating. Over 2 million parts in the eye. And in order for you to see, it doesn't take just these 2 million parts, but also half of your brain to be working together at the same time. You ever heard of a heart transplant? How they take one person's heart and put it into another person, or a lung transplant? We can do a heart transplant. We can do a lung transplant. We can do all sorts of kidney transplant, but we can't do an eye transplant. Because the optic nerve, the thing that connects your eye to the rest of your brain, is made up of over 1 million little nerve fibers that are too sensitively intertwined for us to recreate the thing. I mean, it's just crazy. I know I'm nerding out on this, but I think eyes are crazy. I'm almost done, I promise. Think about your eyeball. I know you can't see it, but touch your eyeball. Feel it for a second. Think about that thing. So it's protected by being put in this little socket. We call it an eye socket. And you have eyebrows to keep the sweat from falling down, the eyelashes to keep the dirt from falling in, and it's also actually guarded by the fastest muscle in the human body. It's called the orbicularis. It's the thing that helps you close your eyelid. Everybody blink, blink real quick. So fast. Fastest muscle you have is designed to protect the eye. Apparently, there's something about vision that is worth protecting at any cost. And I'll be honest with you, the main point for today is a little bit heavy for this early in the week. So I'm going to try to be as clear as I possibly can. I'm going to give you what I want you to think about today in just 5 words, maybe 6. To see is to be free. You can remember that. To see is to be free. That's what I want to, that's the whole reason, that's really everything I want to say today. To see is to be free. Now there's a longer version. To see the truth about Jesus is to be free from the fear that keeps us from following him. But that's kind of a mouthful. Again, to see the truth about Jesus is to be free from the fear that keeps us from following him. But we'll go with the shorter, more memorable one. To see is to be free. Now I want you to be honest with me. How many of y'all would love to tell the story of the time the water became firm beneath your feet? Like, wouldn't that be cool? How many, be for real, like none of you, wouldn't that, like how many of you would love to talk about the time when you just sort of foot skated across the Atlantic Ocean, you know? Or the Mississippi River, or like even your bathtub when you were a kid. You know, like, I would tell this story all the time, and I don't know if people will believe me, but I'd love to. So I guess our goal then is to become the kind of people who get out of the boat. I mean, you know, sometimes people make fun of Peter. If you've been around church for a long time, you probably heard a lot of people make fun of Peter. He's this guy who always puts his foot in his mouth. He's always doing and saying dumb things. And I get it at some level. He earns most of the teasing and making fun that he gets. But dude, I think he's kind of a bad dude. I want you to note this in the story. Peter asked for an invitation out onto the water. They see this guy walking across. They're not sure what it is. They think it's a ghost. Picture this. You're in a boat. It's in a storm. Like you're a little bit worried. I don't know if you've maybe never seen a picture of the body of water they're on. It's called the Sea of Galilee or the Lake of Galilee. It's not huge, but it's surrounded by mountains. And the wind just kind of whips over those mountains and catches the water, and it starts storms. And so you're in a little bit of a storm, and this figure is walking on the water. And they're afraid because it looks like a ghost. And then it says, take courage, I am, don't be afraid. And they know that he's saying, I'm Jesus, but they're not quite sure. And so Peter's like, I want to find out. Now imagine what the disciples are thinking when Peter says, hey, if it's really you, tell me to come to you on the water. I bet they're probably like, Peter, you had other options. You know what I mean? You could have said, Jesus, if it's really you, like do a backflip, you know? Like walking on water, that's cool, but can you like flip and land on water? Or maybe you'd be like, hey, Jesus, you ever seen Moana? Can you do that thing where you like go under and out the other side and land on the boat? Like that'd be cool. But no, Peter says, if it's really you, Lord, tell me to come to you on the water. Why? Why would Peter say this? Maybe it's just because he's crazy. I don't know. But I actually think there's more. It's easy to miss, but I think Peter sees something. I mean, you got to look at the clues when you're reading this story to see what Peter saw. You see, whenever he says, okay, who are you? What's going on? And Jesus says, take courage, I am. Don't be afraid. I think Peter's like, wait a second, I've heard that before. You just said, I am. Wait a second, isn't there a story? Like, whoa. And Peter's thinking back to the time, maybe some of you know the story. Way back in the Old Testament, long before this event took place, God's people are enslaved, like they're in bondage, and their leader Moses is hiding out in the desert, and God comes to him because he's going to tell him to deliver his people. And so Moses is walking along, and he sees this bush that's on fire, but it doesn't burn up, and he turns aside to see it, and you would too, and has a conversation essentially with this voice coming out of the bush, which turns out to be God telling him to go back and tell the king of the world to let his people go. And Moses is freaked out by this. And he's like, okay, so like, who am I supposed to tell them you are? When they say who sent you, what am I supposed to say? And God says, tell them I am sent you, because that is my name. When Peter hears Jesus say, I am, I think he catches that something's going on here. And not only does he hear him say, I am, but he's walking on the water, which would be crazy enough if you didn't know your Old Testament very well. Peter does. He's read the book of Job. He remembers what it says in Job chapter 9, verse 8. God alone stretches out the heavens and walks on the waves of the sea. I think Peter's paying close attention, and I think Peter gets it. Okay, Mr. I am, if it's really you, Show me just how powerful you are. Like, I grew up on water. I've been a fisherman my whole life, and all cajillion times I've placed my foot on the top of the water, it has immediately sunk to the bottom. So if it's really you, if you're God, tell me to come to you on the water. That's what he says. Tell me to walk. To see the truth about Jesus is to be free from the fear that keeps us from following him. To see is to be free. You know, in a general sense, you might say that like the secret to life or the secret to living well or enjoying life is to respond wisely to what's going on around you. Like if there's a baseball flying at your head, that like secret to living well in that moment is to duck or to catch the thing. If you're in traffic and you're seeing cars going by like both directions in front of you, like you need to notice that that's happening and not drive out in between them. If you're at Bible and Beach and you see some cutie pie staring at you from across the beach, like you know what to do in that situation. But if you see some creepo staring at you from across the beach, it's like we're going to walk the other direction, right? Like it's basic common sense. And if I could state the obvious, you can't respond properly to what's going on around you unless you notice what's going on around you. And you can't notice what's going on around you unless you open your eyes. So to see the truth in front of you, whatever it is to be free to respond properly to that situation. Peter sees Jesus, and therefore Peter walks on the water, which raises the question, do we see Jesus? And I think the answer's, well, like, sort of. Like, yeah, at least a little bit, maybe for the most part, a lot of the time, some of the time, I think hopefully most of the time, you know. When my wife was in third grade, the teacher noticed that there was a little bit of a problem. She told her mom, you probably need to go get her eyes checked. Because what would happen is in class, whenever she'd do the math homework on her sheet, she'd do great. But whenever there were answers up on the board or problems up on the board, she'd always get them wrong. She said, I don't think she could see very well. So my wife's mom took her to the eye doctor, and they got her eyes checked. And sure enough, the eye doctor's like, yeah, she probably needed glasses when she was in kindergarten, if not before, okay? So they get her these glasses, and this is the 80s, so they're big old glasses, and she's going home, and some of y'all will meet my wife this week. She's super expressive, beautiful, bright eyes, just big. I mean, they were huge, right? She's reading the signs on the side of the road for the first time. She just thought they were like random shapes, like the Walmart sign was just a blue rectangle. You know, she sees words now. And so she's just as amazed at this new world that's opened up in front of her. And she gets home, and her mom's like crying because she feels so bad. And Beth, my wife, gets out of the car, and she looks up, and she sees this tree, and she just stops, and her jaw drops. And she's just staring at this tree. And her mom comes over, and she's like, what's wrong? And Beth says, the tree has leaves on it. And her mom's like, yeah. And you know whenever you're a kid, how when you draw a tree, you just draw like a trunk, one shape, and then you do like the green cloud for the rest of the tree? She actually thought that's what trees looked like, right? She didn't know that leaves existed until they hit the ground. She's just staring at this fuzzy image. And I think that people in our culture, for the most part, are staring at fuzzy images of Jesus. And this is a constant problem. It's not just today, it's always been a problem. I think there are a lot of people who are looking at Jesus and sort of seeing the shape of what it is, but not catching the full picture. And this happens in a couple of different ways. I think some people see Jesus as the teacher, right? Like most people in our culture, even if they don't like Christians, even if they don't like the church, they're fond of Jesus. Like most people would say, I think Jesus was a pretty good teacher, had some good ideas about loving people and stuff, but there's no way he's divine. Like there's no way he's God. Come on. Like he's not different than all the other good teachers. He's just one of the group, like Buddha and your grandpa and Jesus, right? Like good teacher, but chill out with the whole he's the only God in human form stuff, right? And on the other hand, you have people in the church a lot of times who, no, like Jesus is God. Like he's everything. He's God come to live in human form in front of us. But oftentimes the people who are screaming the loudest about Jesus being God are kind of ignoring his teachings and not actually living up to and living according to the things Jesus said to do. I know not everybody, but in large part, I think a lot of times when y'all look around in our culture, you're going to see people who are staring at one of these two fuzzy images of Jesus, and as a result, they're not free to follow him. Peter keeps both eyes open. He's God walking on the water, and apparently he's a teacher because he's telling me what to do, to walk out to him. Well, let's roll. And what Peter needs in this moment, and really what Peter needs in every moment, and what we need in every moment for that matter, is to keep our eyes fixed on Jesus. And this is where Peter's experience is both a literal event and also a symbolic picture of most days in our life. It's all throughout the Bible. Micah 7:7, the prophet Micah says, "As for me, I will look to the Lord." Colossians 3:1, the Apostle Paul says, "Set your minds, your eyes on things above where Christ is seated at the right hand of God." And Hebrews 12, verse 2 says, "Let us fix our eyes on Jesus, the beginner and finisher of our faith." But notice what the story says. When he saw the wind, he was afraid. Yeah, I'll bet he was. I mean, can you blame the guy? Y'all ever been inner tubing before? Or like water skiing before? You know how when you're inner tubing, or inner tubing especially, you're just like trying to hold on for your dear life, and that water's just like popping you in the face? You ever experienced this before? That water's just coming at you, right? And like you're just supposed to hold on for dear life. I don't know why we think these things are fun, but you're just holding on for dear life, and that water's just coming at you, and it's so hard to keep your eyes open to actually see what's out in front of you so that you can respond in ways that are appropriate. You know, it's difficult. It's hard. It's hard to stay focused on Jesus, man, when the wind is beating at your neck and the waves are splashing all over your cheeks. And at this point, I need you to see this story through the eyes of somebody living in the ancient world. Because for them, the sea wasn't just a body of water, it was a symbol of chaos. Not hard to understand why. These storms just happen. What are you supposed to do? Not hard to understand why there's these sort of living creatures out there, and we're not sure what to do with them. And so in the biblical world, the sea, the water, becomes a symbol. Even now, like I'm bringing my kids to the ocean, right? Like my daughter was born in California. She's been to the ocean plenty of times. My son, this is kind of the first time he remembers, and he's like, "Daddy, are the sharks here?" I'm like, "No, buddy, the sharks are way out there." But we understand a little bit about what that's like, and that world is even more so that the water, the sea, was a symbol of the uncontrollable forces, the things that we can't control, that threaten to tear our life apart. Now, you may not be afraid of the water, but you feel this. For some of you, it's a parent whose raised fist represents everything in this world that you have no control over. Or maybe it's a dad who never raises his hand except to change the channel on the television. And you wonder, sometimes you ask, why don't you care more? And honestly, you never get a clear answer. For still others, it's something at school. Gosh, it could be anything. It could be a report card that for whatever reason, maybe it's for scholarships or to not get in trouble or because you think you have to be a perfectionist. For whatever reason, you need those grades to be a certain letter. For others, it's not like the list of grades. It's the list of people who made the team. And if your name is not on that list, or if you are not starting, then your day, your week, your year, sometimes you feel like your life is falling apart. Still others, it's not about any list. It's about the people, the eyes that are on you, and the friends and even enemies that for some reason you feel like you need to impress. Now, I don't know what it is for you. I don't know if it's school or home or work. I don't know if it's family or friends or relationships. I have no idea. But I know that for all of us, there are things in our life that we can't control that threaten our well-being. It's scary. And then, so your life is a story. Man, you've heard this so often, it's probably become a cliche, but beating the truth into the ground doesn't make it any less true. Your life is a story. You go places and you do things, places and things that somehow form a continuous narrative, a sequence of events just orderly enough to call it a story. Your life is a story. Where will it go from here? And then what? And what always stands in a story? What always stands between the present moment and a happy ending? It's fear. And if all you feel is the wind and all you see is the waves, your end then won't be what it could be. Man, I do not want my story to be the man who was afraid. I want it to be the man who looked at Jesus and said, "Tell me to come to you on the water." And maybe you're thinking, but you don't know what I'm going through. And you're right, I don't. I don't know what you're going through out here. I don't know what you're going through in here. I don't know. But I do see Jesus. And I'm not suggesting that whatever's pulling you away from him is easy or weak. I'm just suggesting that he is stronger. And no matter how high the waves or how strong the wind, the safest and smartest place for your eyes to be is locked in on Jesus. Will you be free? Or will you continue to be held captive by fear? Because the freedom to get out of the boat won't be found by looking within. That well runs dry. And it won't be found by looking around you. Like, your friends are great, I'm sure, but I think drinking and swimming and bathing is about the extent of what they can do with water. No. The secret to the freedom you seek is found in seeing Jesus. No matter how high the waves or how strong the wind, the safest and smartest place for your eyes to be are locked in on him. Do you want to be free? Open your eyes.